Thank you for listening to the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays, and here with me is Jay Jones.
Good morning. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well.
All right. Yeah, you feeling better today?
I am.
Good.
Yeah. This is an actual text-driven Tuesday. It's actually Tuesday.
It is. It is. Today is a Tuesday. Today's actually a Tuesday. I don't even remember. Oh, yesterday I had like different VA appointments. That's it. That's what I had. So yeah, we're doing it on Tuesday. It'll be released late, so people are probably wondering where it's at, and it'll be out in the afternoon, and that's why. So it's what God wanted for you. He didn't want you to have anything on Tuesday morning to listen to. So there you have it. Yep. So here we are, recording a text-driven Tuesday.
And we've got a special guest behind the computer this morning.
It is the one and only Drake Jones.
Hey guys.
Oh, look, somebody said something.
Hey,
the what do you call the person who works the thing? The podcast. What do you call it? Director?
I think that's usually the producer.
The producer?
Do we want to call Drake the producer?
Yeah, Drake's the producer of this episode.
Yeah.
And he actually said, hey.
He'll get credit. He can put it on his resume.
Yeah.
He produced one
podcast.
One episode.
Yeah. All right, Drake, don't be afraid to chime in. All right? Then we'll know you actually paid attention to the sermon.
You got to eat that microphone if you're going to talk, though.
You got notes? You got notes on your phone?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Very nice.
They take notes on their phone like this. People probably look at my kids and they like the guests. They're probably like all judgy. Like, look at these kids playing games on their phones. You know?
Uh-huh.
And nope, they thumbing out notes.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, that's how it is. You know, soon with Neuralink, what they'll do is they'll just put their phone open and they'll just make notes with their mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what's coming, right?
That's what they say. I can't imagine.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll go with that.
No. No thanks. I'm gonna have to pass on that one.
Knowing what I know about how they
I've seen and read enough sci-fi and horror.
You know how this
movies
works.
And novels to
You know how this works.
Yeah. No thanks.
Yeah. You don't want to become part of the Borg. And I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Well, shall we jump in? What do you got for me? You always have something funny for me. You don't have anything today?
So the passage was on Know Your Limits.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, I was thinking of this clip from. You ever watch King of the Hill, Jay?
Like the old cartoon? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of this clip from King of the Hill.
All right.
This is from the very first episode.
The very first episode of King of the Hill.
Yeah, very first episode.
All right.
And I thought that this would tie right into. First, it's a clip for sports, okay. And second, it has to do with Know Your Limits.
All right.
So you want
Let's see it. Okay. Yeah, switch it over. Let's take a look.
All right, this is from King of the Hill. It's adult animation from, I don't know, early 2000s.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Nah, don't you worry, son. You just do your best.
Don't listen to her, Bobby. If you want to win, you're going to have to do better than your best.
How do I do that?
You got to give 110%. That's what'll give you that winning edge.
But what if the Wildcats give 110% too?
Well, then you got to try even harder.
How about if Bobby gave 112%?
Sure, that'd work.
Or maybe 113?
Yeah, that's even better.
No, I don't know. 13 is a very unlucky number.
Look, we're not talking about 13. We're talking about 113, and even... Okay, give 112. What's the difference? Look, Bobby, just do your best, okay?
All right.
That's good.
So that's what I was thinking about as you were doing as you were doing your intro on Sunday. I was thinking, just give 110%.
Just got to.
And if the other team gives 110%, you're just going to have to give 112.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, you got to know your limits.
Yeah.
You got to know them.
Okay. So you gave a little quote at the beginning of your sermon.
You like that quote?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one.
Kind of missed it the first time. I don't
You
know
did?
what. I don't know what happened. A kid did something, or I'm not sure what was going on. I think someone was asking me for something, and I missed it.
You want to hear it again?
Yeah. Let's hear it again.
Okay.
I caught
right.
caught it. You didn't give like the full quote a second time, but I heard kind of the pieces of it.
Yeah. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects the wind to change, and the realist adjusts the sails. William Ward. I really like that quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it a lot. What are you prone more toward, I wonder, George? Are you prone more toward pessimism or optimism? See, everybody falls into one of those two, I think. But we want to be realist. I like the quote because it kind of reminds me of what biblical wisdom is.
If you had to pick between the two, I probably would lean toward pessimist.
Okay, all right. That's why this is a dynamic podcast, because I kind of lean toward optimism. Yeah. Yeah. So
you're the yin to my yang.
I guess so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, we don't want to do that though.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be realist.
Right.
And that's I love it because I love the quote because it's very practical and it reminds me of biblical wisdom. Not that this person intended for that quote to do that, but that's what biblical wisdom is. It teaches you how to live in a world. It's realistic about the world that you live in, and wisdom helps you to live in the world. We live in a fallen world. In order to navigate the world, we don't just want to be pessimist or optimist, and we want to be a realist. And that's really what Ecclesiastes does,
right?
And what Solomon does in Ecclesiastes. And so he's part of that. And being a realist is knowing your limitations, knowing your limits.
Yeah.
And so everybody's got limits. What I found to be interesting as I started to think about this is how an American will never let a good opportunity go to waste. There is a tremendous entire industry, very profitable. Maybe we should capitalize on it, George. It's trying to help people to see their limits and break through them. You know what I mean? It's like self-help.
Yeah.
Find your limits and break through them. Now, a lot of this can be really good, I think. Very helpful, just in a general sense. I think it can be very helpful. But you can see how this would be immensely popular. Identify your limits. You want to be a realist about, your weaknesses. But when you identify them, you can work on them, and you probably can break through them. You can sell a lot of books. It's good strategy. But this really is the opposite. Solomon's kind of doing the opposite in this text. He's kind of thinking, okay, let's identify some limits, and let's not try to break them so that you can be happy.
Right. So you kind of laid out three different categories. The first was there are some limits that you can break.
Yeah.
And it's
you
good.
should.
It's good.
Yeah,
it's good for you to break.
Yeah, I mean, I think God does want you to be the best version of yourself. We shouldn't be lazy people,
right? Ever.
Christians should never be a lazy person in work or just in your own self-improvement,
right?
And in that, I don't mean we don't want to only just be spiritual people. We live in a real world. We want to be good leaders, good servants. Whatever you're doing, you want to be good. So, when you go in the military, some people are just really good at PT. There are others that they're genetically not gifted. Well, that's no excuse to be not good at PT. Like if you're in the military, you got to be good at it. So you might have to work, 10 times as hard as someone else. Well, that's what it means. You're just going to have to break through that limit.
Yeah.
There's some other ones that, in the church that you can really use as an excuse to not get involved in the church. Like some people are just introverted by nature. Right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself. I'm pretty introverted, but I was really introverted in high school. I mean, I would walk from class to class with my head down. I wouldn't even look at people. I was so shy. And I remember, I think it was my senior year of high school, I intentionally said, I'm going to start looking people in their eyes when I talk to them.
Okay.
And so I had to start working on that. I mean, now I stand up in front of our congregation and speak.
Yeah.
But
you never would have then.
No, back in high school.
No way.
No.
Yeah.
It would have been really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that is the gifting of the Spirit.
Right.
But in that in the way God works, He also He requires you to do something also.
Right. Yeah.
And so I've had to work on public speaking.
Yeah.
Being more intentional in the way that I talk to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe someone's not a preacher, but they come, they're a church member,
Mm-hmm.
but they're really introverted. But that's a limitation, right? And we're limited by that.
Right.
But you're to push through that, beyond that, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually enjoy the benefits that God has for you as far as fellowship with other believers.
Mm-hmm.
Usually people will find that when they do, they're like, man, I'm really glad, that I came and was involved in this.
Right.
So one I thought of was, fathers. A lot of men today, at an ever increasing rate, never had a good father, and that's a huge limitation, right? You've never seen what a good husband looks like or a good father yourself, so that's a limit. You got to break through that limit. You got to be the one who pushes beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole variety of these that are
Right.
you can identify and break through.
Yeah. But then there are some limitations that we can break through, but we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Right.
Obvious one is sex.
Right.
Yeah. People break through this limit. God's design, His limitation that He's put is that sex is for marriage
Mm-hmm.
between a man and a woman.
Right.
One man, one woman, and only within those confines. And
Right.
that's for your happiness and joy. People break that all the time.
Right.
They don't, and not even after marriage, before whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's on our side. And look how happy society is. Right? They're so happy. It's brought them so much joy to break this limitation all the time.
Uh-huh.
So obviously there are tons.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are those that you just can't break no matter what.
Right.
But just because they're impossible to break doesn't mean that we won't try
Mm-hmm.
or fight against it.
Right.
He brought one up already that I had mentioned. That's like living in the past.
Mm.
He talked about that from wisdom doesn't ask the question, or why were the former days better than these? It's not from wisdom that you ask that, but that's 7:10. So we can see, and yet people will do it. They'll try to live in the past.
Mm.
The days were better, and he said that's you can't. The past is gone.
Right.
So you can't live in it, but yet we'll try, and it doesn't make you happy.
Yeah.
In the present moment. So that's what we're dealing with in this passage.
Okay.
We've got a couple of universal limitations that we have upon us.
Yeah. So get us back into the context, because I like how you tied it into last week's. It's not completely separated, even though there's a little bit of a different angle. So get us back into the context.
So last week we were looking at wisdom applied with respect to the authority of the king, really in verses 1 through 5. And we saw that we are to be law-abiding citizens, not to be quick to show public disapproval, or to be warned of the danger of working against the king, and to be discerning when opposing the king. And verse 5 kind of helps us, and verse 6, they kind of go together. They link us together into this passage. Where he says in verse 5, whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. So I had warned before this for standing in an evil cause, meaning against the king.
Mm.
So, and he's warned against the danger of doing that, and to be discerning. There is a proper time and way to perhaps approach the king if you disagree with something, right? So maybe don't show public disapproval. Like if you're in court, he has some decree, you turn around in front of everyone and walk out. That would be a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
You might could get away with it depending on how severe. You might not, though. I mean, the king has ultimate authority. It could cost you your life. Could be a time to actually stand against him and stand with people against the king Could be a time not to. King has absolute authority. Wisdom will know the proper time and the just way to do that. That links us into verse 6. Verse 6 starts to talk about there being a time. There is a time for everything, and there is a correct decision for everything. Verse 9 tells us the sphere that he's talking about still is kind of the sphere of government. If you look at verse 9, it says, "All this I observed while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun when man had power over man to his hurt." So we're still talking about the sphere of authorities. And that's a crystal clear, I think, a description of government. Man having power over man to his hurt. And no matter how good a human government is, someone is usually hurt by it. You can be hurt by your own government. You can be hurt by other governments. There's no perfect government. Even Solomon's. There are people that were forced into labor and all kinds of things and he's seen as this amazing king, probably, I don't know, he's in the top 5, even though he has a really bad turn of events, I think. But that's the kind of the sphere. But behind this sphere of the king there is another king, I think. And I think there's things that I've missed in this book. I think Solomon is like a genius. You know what I mean? He's like
he's the wisest person to ever live.
Well, as I said before,
every time you say he's a genius from the
that's
pulpit,
what you think of?
I think to myself,
he's the wisest person ever lived.
I think
It's like
thank you,
have
Jay,
you seen like those cakes
for
that
this
have
obvious?
like these cakes that have like these layers in them? It's like Ecclesiastes is like a cake like that. But I'm not smart enough to find all the layers, but I found some of them.
Yeah.
But the curious thing about him is, as we saw before, he is the wisest man in the world. He just can't apply it to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he can apply it to the world and to everything else in the world.
Right.
He just struggles in applying it to himself.
And that must have been truly frustrating for him. I mean,
Right.
that you can imagine being him, and you have this wisdom, and yet you still find in yourself that you are a sinner.
Right.
Yeah. That must have been really, that must have made him feel really powerless.
This book,
it comes out in Ecclesiastes.
it does,
right?
yeah. That whole confession section we saw, but the layer, there's these layers, and we've seen them sometimes, and I think here's one. This book is written in a way where God is not like the explicit topic, but he's in a way the main topic that's there, but you can't fully like see him all the time. It's almost like Isaiah in the throne room. He can't look up and see, but he can see the feet. That's almost how this book is written. So here in this section, it's talking about the government, and now in limitations in regard to that. Know your limits if you want to be happy. Behind it is a king that's behind the main king, and he's there, like looming in the background.
Right.
And so that's also here. So it's kind of a multi-layered passage in that regard.
Okay.
So to know your limits.
Okay.
If you want to be happy, that's how this section begins. That wisdom will make your face shine. So if you want to live in a fallen world and have some joy and happiness, you got to be able to apply wisdom to the world.
Yeah, because if you're just continually hitting against that wall that cannot move, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Okay.
got it.
So this is applying wisdom to your limitations. And it's 2 limits you must accept if you want to be happy. All right. So let's have you read the passage, and then we'll walk through those two limits.
I will start in 8:1. So switch over to the tablet, please. I'll start in 8:1, but the section that we're talking about is 6 through 9. Who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. I say, keep the king's command because of God's oath to him. Be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is supreme, and who may say to him, what are you doing? Whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. For there is a time and a way for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. For he does not know what is to be. For who can tell him how it will be? No man has the power to retain the spirit or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. All this I observed while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his hurt. All right, there it is.
All right,
So-
2 limits you must accept if you want to be happy.
That's right.
The first one is found in verses 6 and 7. A wise person accepts the limitations of knowledge of the future.
That's it.
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one would seem obvious,
You're right.
but maybe not. Maybe we don't really live in that capacity.
Mm.
Then maybe it's something that we know, but it's something that we fight against to our own harm.
Well, this is why people like astrology and they like going to psychics and
Right.
You know.
Palm readers.
right.
Right. Why did Solomon go to the witch?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not Saul. I mean Saul. Why did Saul run to the witch?
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't hear from the Lord anymore. The Lord had left him. He wanted to know what was going to happen
Right.
in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy story, dude. I reread it
It
this
is,
week.
yeah.
It's such a wild story.
Mm-hmm.
After he expels all of the witches out of the land,
Mm-hmm.
he then runs to find one
Right.
because he's desperate to know the future.
Uh-huh.
And apparently there are people on the earth that are like mediums that can like tap into the spiritual realm,
Mm-hmm.
try to gain secret knowledge. Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And he tries.
Mm-hmm. I've got a friend who's writing his PhD on magic in the Bible.
Okay.
And so he's been doing a lot of research, and he'll send me stuff every once in a while.
Okay.
And he's looked at that story. It's bizarre.
People don't think magic is real. You know that? They think this is some
Yeah.
relic of an old time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's real.
Yeah, I do too.
I think the Egyptians magicians were doing real magic.
Yeah.
They're drawing upon us the spiritual realm, demonic power, and to do things.
Yeah, I don't think that God is telling the Israelites don't go to mediums and diviners and because they're just fake.
Right.
I think he's warning them, don't go to them because they're real.
Right.
So.
There's the girl in Acts who has a spirit of Python. A Pythian.
A python?
Well, that's what it translates to in English.
Okay.
But the Pythian spirit.
Yeah.
That's the spirit. Supposedly that was what's the oracle? The famous oracle of Delphi. Oracle of Delphi.
Mm-hmm.
Same type of entity involved.
Yeah.
So a spirit that seizes you. Get it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you.
Like a python.
I
Constricting your spirit.
I got you.
Squeezing the life out of you.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So we are obsessed with wanting to know the future, but it is a limitation.
Yeah, I mean, we Christians may not go to mediums and go to palm readers and stuff, but they may sit there and think about the future, what's going to happen, what could happen, what might not happen, what do I need to do to make this happen, and
Right.
chew your nails off your fingers.
Right. And you told the story of you trying to decide about seminary and
Right. Yeah, I had it all planned out.
mm-hmm.
I had it planned out exactly what needed to happen. I had to leave the Army. I had to resign my commission as an officer. That takes a year to get, that whole process to be done. So I'm coming up on the end of that. It's time to leave. Not going to have a job anymore. And it looked really good. The plan looked good. I'd sell the house, make probably about $50,000 off of that sell. I had to sell with the 1970 GTO that I had. Probably make about $20,000 off of that sell. Because that was it's a rare muscle car, and everything's looking good. We moved to Fort Worth. We'd go to Southwestern. Wouldn't be that far away from, Lawton. Be able to come back, see the parents, all that stuff easy. Angie could get a job. I mean, who can't get a job in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, George? Who can't get a job? Right? So we go down there because Angie will get a job while I'm in seminary.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have one while I was in the Army. And I'm like, oh, this will be sweet because we'll pocket some money. That's a lot of money. You could live off, maybe a year and a half, 2 years off of that while you're at seminary. And we're looking for apartments. First thing we say, like, man, these apartments are ridiculously expensive down here.
Mm.
And then the lady tells Angie, and Angie has like a good resume. She's like, you ain't going to find a job down here. We're like, what are you talking about? She's like, people put in resumes down here everywhere, and they don't hear back from people for like a year.
Mm.
If they hear back, like there's no jobs.
Yeah.
There's no jobs. And the housing bubble happened. It hit all at the same time. But I had all of these plans laid out for like a year. This, backwards planning. And then I'll be there doing this, and then none of it, and like was all falling apart. So we just sit down and say, all right, well, Angie has this idea. Well, maybe I can get a job in Kansas City. I'm like, yeah, maybe. And she's like, would you go to, what about Midwestern? I'm like, I had said before, and I'm not joking. We're driving.
I believe you.
We were driving through Kansas City once. She's like, what about that school? I said, hell will freeze over. God really made me eat my words. I said, hell will freeze over before I go to Midwestern.
I remember when I was looking at seminaries, because I looked at Southwestern also, because it's the closest one.
Yeah.
And then I decided maybe not. And I started looking around, and I looked at Midwestern. I was like, no thanks.
Yeah. That's exactly what I said, George. Hell will freeze over before I go to Midwestern.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it froze over.
I guess so.
So she's like, oh, man, I can get a job in Kansas City. I got a friend up here. So her best friend was working up there at advertising agency. She's like, so we're like, well, what do we have to do? Like, maybe we just have to lower the price on our house and just, I mean, nobody. You remember when that happened? There were 0 houses selling. Mm. Like we're in a recession. Nobody's buying muscle cars. Mm. In fact, one guy that I tried to sell. What
year was that?
I tried to sell it to a collector. He said, nobody is spending their money right now on things like this. That's what he told me. 2010, was that 2010, 2009? Okay. Into 2009, beginning of 2010, somewhere right in there, 2010. So we're like, all right, we'll just lower the house down as much as we can, and we'll sell the car for. I don't want to tell you what I sold it for. God, it hurts me. Mm. So we're in Kansas City. We go visit Midwestern. I mean, I'm not like super thrilled about it, but he's just like, what do you think? Would you go here? And so I was like, I just surrendered. Like, all right, if God wants me to go to Midwestern, then I'll go here. This is where I'll go. Yeah. And I'm not joking. Like 5 minutes later, her phone rings and she has a job offer. While we're up there, the job offer at that place. We get back on Monday, 7:30 in the morning. A guy calls me from Houston, and he's like, hey, you still got that car? Don't sell it. I'm driving up. And I'm like trying to play it cool. Like, well, I mean, I don't know if it'll be here when you get here, but I guess, if I tell you I'll hold it, you promise you're coming? I'm coming. I'm driving right now. So he drove up, put a little refrigerator magnet all around it, make sure it wasn't like all bondoed up and stuff. And he paid for it without driving it. Mm. I was like, you want me to start it so you can hear it? He was like, no. Here's the money. He brought it. I drove it up on his trailer, and he took off with it. And then later that afternoon, a realtor called, said, got a buyer on your house. So all happened. Yeah. Wasn't anything like I had planned. And I was pretty worried about it for a while because I was about to be without a job with a house I couldn't pay for, and no idea how I'm going to go do anything. Right. And none of the stuff I had planned for happened. Yeah. Zero.
And I think that one of the things that we want to make clear that we don't want people to hear is, well, don't plan.
Right.
Because you don't know if your plans are going to ever, come to fruition. Mm-hmm. You still plan. Even though you accept the limitations of your ignorance of the future.
Right.
You still, you still have to plan for the future. And there's plenty of scripture from Solomon dealing with that. But the point is, don't act like you're in control of the future.
Right. Yeah. To surrender to this first limitation could really change some people's entire life, I think. in verse 6, there are two huge themes that recur in the Bible over and over. One is God's absolute sovereignty over everything. God has determined everything that takes place. There is a time and a way for everything. So that's the first thing that we need to understand if we're going to accept this limitation. God has appointed a time. Chapter 3, we elaborated on this in great detail. It's a time to be born, a time to die, a time to mourn, a time to laugh, all of those. And that is a poetic way of telling you every single event that ever happens in your life, every situation has been determined by God. You just think about it. Just make a practical exercise. Who determined when you would be born and where on the planet you would be born,
Right.
and who your parents would be and what your genetics would be? Well, God determined that. And at the time of your birth and the time of your death and everything in between. Somehow we are like, okay, well, God determined my birth, and maybe I'll agree my death, though we fight against that too. But all the things in between, those are up to me. That's not the case.
Right.
Everything that happens, every single event, there is a time, all times appointed by God. Some people say this is a high view of the sovereignty of God. I just say this is just the biblical view of the sovereignty of God. That doesn't negate human activity and human responsibility and human choice, as the very next couple of words tell us. The word, and there is a way for everything. So there's an appointed time and a way for everything. Well, this word way is strange. It's mishpat. You know what that means from studying your Hebrew vocabulary. What does it mean? Like 99% of the time it's translated. It's judgment, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's translated here as way because there is nuance in the word.
Right.
He's not saying, hey, make a judgment, like as far as like you're a judge. What he's saying is you make a judgment as what's the right decision? What is the right decision to be made at this moment in my life? And there is a right decision, and you have the ability to make a decision. You might make a right decision, in which case things would go well for you, and your life would prosper, or you may make a bad decision and things will go bad for you.
Right.
And that's real. That's not an illusion. And the mysterious thing is that every single choice that you do make, and it's a real life choice, and the consequences that follow, though you made the choice that led to it, even all of those things were determined by God as well. So, and it fits perfectly in with this discussion of, living under authority and government. Because when should you oppose the king? When should you go to him in private and question some decree he's issued? Well, there is an appropriate time, and it might go really well for you. Maybe you would be rewarded for your wisdom. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it'll go really bad for you, and you're thrown out of the king's court,
Right.
Or worse. So wisdom means that you would make the correct decision. And that's really what troubles us.
Right.
And that's what leads into verse 7.
Yeah.
The great trouble that lies heavy upon all of us is that we want to be able to know what the right decision is, and we can't know it because we can't know the future. And I think that's there. It's pretty clear. The latter part of verse 6, there is a time and a way for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. 4 tells us what the trouble is. 4, he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? So anyone can identify with this, okay?
Right.
You have some situation laid before you. It's a real life decision that can have, maybe it can really help your family. Maybe it's, do I take a different job? Do I resign this job and take this other job? I don't really know what to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a correct one to make that's going to be best for you. There's one that's not good. And so then you start to worry. Oh man, if I only knew what would happen in the future, and if I could only see this or that, and so you're troubled. And that's that can be in big decisions and small ones.
Right.
So that's the first limitation. Fight against it and it will just increase the sorrow and the trouble of your heart. Accept it and understand that God is good and does care for you, and you'll have less trouble. That's kind of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing that I brought out was 99. You've heard the saying, 99% of the things you worry about don't happen. I don't know where that came from, but it is true. It's true. 99% of the things you worry about don't happen. The 1% that do happen, you couldn't have changed anyway.
Right.
So why worry about all this stuff? And just think about what happened pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think back to your life? I think it was the end of 2019,
Mm-hmm.
right? Into 2019.
Yeah.
I said, we were, whoa.
I don't know what that was. That's weird.
That's the government. I said the magic word.
You did.
I said COVID.
You said COVID.
The
and
CIA has one,
they've tapped into us.
they've got their satellite that causes strokes.
Uh-huh.
It's laser pointed at me right now, so watch out. Okay.
Yeah.
99% of things you worry about don't happen. Think about it. COVID 2019,
Right.
not even on our radar.
Mm-hmm.
Freshman year, you remember that, Drake? It was the end of your freshman year. It's the furthest Cash football had gone in like 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting to play as a freshman on varsity only kid.
Yeah.
Such great times, even greater times, George, because when football season ends, that means baseball season's about to start. Life is great. So all of the things I worried about in 2019, but I'm thinking about in the future. 0% of them actually happened.
Right.
And and things that were 5 million times worse happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
COVID hit,
I don't even.
and no one was that wasn't on anyone's radar.
Yeah.
No one had any idea how their lives would be altered by that.
Mm-hmm.
Completely changed, completely altered.
Yeah.
Almost everyone that I know now knows someone in their family was affected and actually probably died of COVID.
Mm.
That wasn't on anybody's radar back then.
Right.
So just think about it.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things you're worrying about right now? You wish that you knew the future so you could know how to plan for them. None of them are probably going to happen.
Yeah.
None of them.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird to think about?
This was the premise of Minority Report. You remember that movie, Jay? You remember Minority Report with Tom Cruise?
Is that where they preemptively arrest you for crimes?
Yeah. They've got like the psychics or whatever plugged
That's
up,
right,
and they can predict when someone is going to do a crime, and they go and arrest the person before they commit it.
Yeah. Yep. So,
even if we had the ability to do that, how do we know that by stopping one thing that something 100 times worse
George,
isn't going to happen?
Getting into that time
It's
travel paradox?
It's the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah, the butterfly effect. Yeah.
You remember in The Matrix?
But there is someone who knows that. Who knows?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
You remember The Matrix? They go to the Oracle.
That's right.
And she says, "Don't mind the vase." He turns around, what vase? Yeah. And he turns around, knocks it over. And it's like, "How did you know?" And she's like, "Well, what's really going to get you is when you wonder, would you have broken it if I hadn't said anything?"
Right.
Yeah. Like the limits to we think of time in this really linear way, and I keep having these movie references. Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Endgame?
Yeah.
When Hulk is talking to what's her name? The sorcerer.
The ancient one.
Yeah, the ancient one. And she, you take the stone out of this time and you create a branch.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a billion branching realities.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know, and so it comes down to this: is we struggle against it for this reason, is that we don't trust God. I think we don't trust God with our future. Maybe we don't believe Him when He says, for the believer, for the Christian, all things work together for good, for those that love God and are called according to His purpose.
Right.
Even the things that are in the future we can't see, that might be uncomfortable or cause us pain and suffering.
Mm.
So we worry about all that stuff because we're trying to prevent it all from happening,
Right.
and we can't. Now, so then comes this
How does
question.
how does this keep us from becoming fatalist?
Well, because he said there's a correct decision to be made.
Yeah.
I think that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's true, that part is true, doesn't mean that this other part's not true, that you need to be a wise person and you need to learn how to apply wisdom to every situation,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a correct way.
Mm.
There's a correct way for everything.
Yeah.
And you need to be wise
Yeah.
and do it. So
decades ago, when there were announcements in like the paper, there's going to be a wedding or something this time, this date, this place. At the end, they'd have a DV. That DV was Deo Volente,
mm-hmm.
Lord willing, God willing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now this was decades,
Yeah. Lord willing.
decades ago. If you ever read something old and they've got, you see that little DV, it's this idea. Here's the plan.
If the Lord wills,
if God wills,
then
if
we'll
God
do it.
wills, then this will happen.
Yeah. That's right. So we do have to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't just say, "Oh, like you said, we're a fatalist, and we're just floating down the lazy river of life,
Mm-hmm.
on our inner tube, and whatever happens, and I'll bounce on my inner tube off to this side of this lazy river and back to the other."
Yeah.
We can't live like that.
Mm.
We have real decisions to make, and so how do we make them? Now, I didn't extract this from the text. I just said this is just some practical.
Would you like to see how someone other than us believes that we make decisions, Jay?
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Let's hear it. Let's see it.
Okay.
Who is it? Who are you showing?
This is our friend Leighton Flowers. Leighton Flowers down in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
We've shown some Leighton Flowers clips before.
Yeah.
This one's a pretty good one.
Yeah. Soteriology 101.
All right, here we go.
Calvinism says men choose according to their greatest desire. The desire, in other words, makes the determination on Calvinism. We simply disagree. We say people make determinations. In the same mysterious way God chose to create ex nihilo, he created something from nothing. We can't explain exactly how he does that. Nobody can explain how God creates something from nothing. But so too, we are given by God the ability to create our own choices. God is creative, and we are made in his image as creative beings. And therefore, we're given a level of creative ability, the ability to make choices. So the mystery of libertarian freedom is similar to the mystery of creation itself. God created something from nothing. In a similar way, he has given us the ability to create something from nothing, namely our desires and our choices.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So there's Leighton Flowers.
Yeah.
Jay, did you know that? Did you know that we have the ability, like God, to create ex nihilo?
No, because I don't believe in fantasies. I don't believe in fantasies. Did you?
So how do we make decisions? How do we make decisions? Well, we just create them out of nothing.
Yeah,
We just
right.
create them out of nothing.
Just create them out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
First off, like in the Bible where it talks about God's creation, there's this particular word for creating ex nihilo that only applies to God. I don't think it ever is used of man creating anything. I have to look that up. I think there's two different words. There's whenever man creates and he's using things that are there. It's always two different words.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, but a lot of inaccuracies in that statement. This isn't a Calvinists believe this, we believe this thing. This is almost every person who's ever thought about humans making choices believes this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this incredibly small minority who believe like Leighton Flowers.
I hope that it's a very, very small minority.
It's very small. Even I'm talking even non-Christian philosophers who think about
Right.
who study, epistemology and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
He acts like no one's ever written about this stuff before. The way he talks about it,
yeah.
that it popped into being from nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
like his, ability to choose.
Why?
This is easy to
Why
refute,
did you?
though.
Why did you get out of bed this morning, Jay?
I don't just because
Just
because
because.
I decided ex nihilo to wake up and to come.
Did you eat anything?
I did. Yeah, I had a little breakfast burrito.
Why did you eat that?
Well, I saw it and I thought to myself, I have zero taste for that.
Mm-hmm.
None at all.
Yeah.
I don't actually even want to eat it. But, I've got to have nutrition in my body.
Mm.
So I'll just create a choice and a desire for it.
Yeah.
That's how he describes things, right?
Given his view of libertarian free will, which is man is free to choose whatever he wants,
Right.
it would reduce us to rocks.
Yeah.
Because without some kind of motivation behind our decisions, we wouldn't do anything.
Right.
Why would I even get out of this chair?
This is not a hard thing to understand. The reason it's pushed back against, and we are deviating into another thing a little bit, but that's okay. You're always going to make the choice that you most desire to make.
Mm-hmm.
That's how your will works. You do make choices. They're real choices. The Calvinist is not saying you don't make real choices.
Right.
Saying you make meaningful choices. They're based on what you most want to do.
Now you can be your desires can be coerced.
Yeah.
So a guy could stand in front of you with a gun and say your wallet or your life.
Right.
So
And
you don't want to do either one of those, right?
You don't want to, but you want to live.
Yeah, you choose the one that you want the most, right?
Yeah, you want to live more than you want to die.
Mhm.
Now, you can also, people will say, well, that, you always are going to choose what's going to be best for you. It's not always the case. You may actually would desire to save someone at the cost of your own life,
Mhm.
right? So there's a child in a fire in a house, and
Mhm.
people do this all the time. They'll run into a burning house to save some children. Well, why would they do that? Well, because what did they want most at the time? They wanted the child to live more than they cared if they lived or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they wanted. They wanted the child to live.
Yeah.
So they were willing to die to save the child.
Right.
This isn't hard to understand.
Right.
The reason they don't like it is because what the Bible says about the human will is that it's so corrupted by sin that our will is bound by it in such a way that we never choose the things of God.
Mm-hmm. They want mankind to have the kind of free will that even God doesn't have. Like God is not free to do just
Right.
whatever because God cannot lie.
Yes.
Right.
God cannot even choose to lie.
Right. He is bound by his nature.
Exactly.
His nature is truth.
Uh-huh.
So he'll never even have the desire to lie. So he's not free in this weird, unbiblical, just irrational
Right.
type of freedom.
Yeah. And people say, well, that God can be bound and something's greater than God. No, God is bound by his own nature.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
If there was something external to God binding him.
Yeah, if he was following some outside law that said don't lie, then that would be different.
Yeah. If he was bound by a choice,
Mhm.
say, George, of the Molinist persuasion, even if that is of a billion possible universes, well, who dealt God the cards of these are the ones you must choose from?
Uh-huh. Right.
Something outside of himself.
Mhm.
And this is one of the critiques.
Yeah.
But God's only bound by himself,
Mm.
by his own will, which is perfect. So in a way, he's really unbound.
Right.
He's perfect.
Yeah.
How can you improve upon perfection?
Mm-hmm. Right.
It can't be done. But we are also bound by our nature. And the problem is our nature has fallen in sin.
Mm.
Now, what does that mean? Well, that means we can't do an ex nihilo. I hear the gospel ex nihilo, then I go, oh, you know what? That sounds great. I think I'll have some of that, please. If that were the case, then Ephesians chapter 2 doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have something to actually boast about because you created ex nihilo, a choice, and you chose God and your neighbor didn't choose God, and that's the difference between you two.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get to boast and he doesn't.
Right.
What's eliminated by all of that is that there's no amount of anything in you that's going to choose God. God must change your will. He must free you from the bondage of sin.
Mm-hmm.
He must perform a rescue operation upon you.
Yeah.
And break through the hardness of your heart, replace your heart of stone, give you a heart of flesh. And this is going to come as a shocker, George, to people. The one who is a Calvinist, who actually is a real Calvinist, believes that a Christian or Calvinist Christian does make a choice at conversion.
Right.
There's a real choice. But what happens is when God frees your will from being bound by sin, gives you a new heart, then you see Christ for who he is. And who is he? Who is God? The most desirable being in the universe.
Yeah.
It's like somebody just revealed to you that you are able to take for yourself the inheritance left by Elon Musk when he died. Like Elon Musk died, and he left all of his billions to George Mays. And then it's like the blinders got removed, and they're like, there it is, it's yours, take it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd be insane to not take it. No strings attached, it's just yours.
Mm-hmm.
Go seize it.
Yeah.
And this is why Jesus gives these parables about the treasure hidden in the field, right? Well, to the rest of the world, that's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But to the person who sees Christ for who he is, they'd sell everything they had in their entire life in order to buy that field so that the treasure in that field could be theirs.
Yeah.
They do anything. And that's what happens to the sinner. Sins, I have to let go of these sins to have Christ for myself. That's a no-brainer. Throw these sins off. Like, take the rucksack off. Everything's binding me down. I've got to have that which is most desirable now. And you make the choice to follow Christ. That's faith.
Yeah.
You cling to Christ by faith, and it's a real human choice done by a will that's been set free. You can't choose. You would never do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we choose?
Right. How do we make decisions?
Let's bring it back in here.
Okay.
If we're not floating down the lazy river of God's providence, just trusting him, we have to make decisions. How do we do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a very simple grid.
Okay. Let's hear it.
There's only one question to ask to start, so there may be a couple others that follow, but the main one is can I glorify God in this or not? That's it. That's the first question. If the answer is no, then you don't do that thing. That's the only one. Can I glorify God if I do this?
So put some angles on this.
Okay.
Maybe ask it in different ways so that people really grab it. Is this a sin?
Yeah. Obviously, you can't glorify God while you're sinning.
Yeah.
So you don't do that.
So if this choice would include me sinning, then no.
Then no.
That's not
no.
the way. That's not the way to go.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So then you have maybe other choices that aren't going to be sinful either way,
Mm-hmm.
and then you still ask the question, can I glorify God in this or not?
Mm.
So for instance, perhaps you have two jobs. One job says, you are forbidden for being a Christian in this workplace.
All right.
The other job says, hey, you want to be a Christian at this place? Then go right ahead. We have freedom of expression here. No brainer to me.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You're going
Right.
to take that one.
Uh-huh.
But what about if both of them?
And this would maybe apply to if you're looking for a job.
Yeah.
This one requires you to work on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
This one does not.
Yeah.
Well, wisdom would say choose the one that allows you to worship with the church on the Lord's Day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But there are some that are required,
Mm-hmm.
that may be required to work on Sunday, such as emergency services type jobs.
Police, doctors, firemen. Yeah.
So the question also then becomes, do we need Christians in those workplaces?
Mm-hmm.
Can I glorify God by being a Christian in this workplace?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a variety of choices.
Right.
And you may have more than one that you can do. So the next one would be, what helps me to take care of my family best?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me anyway. Like these are just practical
Right.
things I'm working out.
Mm-hmm.
How can I take care of my wife and my family best if I have more than one option available? That's the next one. So that's the one I go with, right? That's just common sense.
Yeah.
Pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people in this, Kevin DeYoung has written a book on this. R.C. Sproul's written a book on this. There's another one, Bruce Waltke. I don't know if you know him, Old Testament.
I didn't even know about these books.
Kevin DeYoung's got one called Just Do Something.
Huh.
R.C. Sproul's is maybe called What is the Will of God? Like, people want to know, what is the will of God for my life?
Right.
And most of the time when they say that, it's, who does God want me to marry? What job
Right.
does he want me to have? Where does he want me to go to school? And those are not things that are revealed to us.
Right.
But when the Bible talks about what is the will of God, it says things like, this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you avoid sexual immorality. Well, here's the will of God for your life.
Right.
Well, that's not what people usually want to know.
Yeah.
Right? But that's what God has revealed to us.
Uh-huh.
God has revealed his will to us in the Bible.
Right.
And it doesn't really have to do with go to this school, meet this girl, get married, have kids, have this job. That's not it.
It's not there.
The will of God has been revealed in how we're supposed to live, and how we're supposed to make decisions. So God has given us wisdom,
right,
in the scriptures.
Right.
I've been reading through Proverbs,
Mhm.
and it just covers a massive area.
It really does.
I mean, it just covers every single area of your life. Study it. Read Proverbs. When you have to make a decision, think, what has God told me how to live?
Yeah.
What has his word revealed to me?
Yeah.
And then having answered these questions, does this involve sinning? Will it glorify God? Is it wise? Then trust God and make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I brought up the one about, maybe you have more than one person you can marry.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real one. I mean, for some, say there's two people that you could marry, like two men. Maybe you dated both of them. Your parents like both of them. They'd make good husbands. They're Christians. You glorify God. How do you choose then? You know what I mean? And you just go with the one that you like the most.
Mm.
That's not like selfish, right? Like, who do you like the most?
Yeah.
Pick that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Angie got me.
Yeah. It's like the way that John Piper answered the question, how do I know that I married the right person?
You're married to him?
Look at the names on the marriage license.
Right.
That's the person.
Right. You're married. Yeah. You're married to him.
Yeah.
So-
But we can make wise decisions based upon what God has revealed in his word. When you are looking for someone to marry, the first thing you should ask is, are they mature Christians?
Right.
Right. If they're not a believer, then that's immediately off the table.
Yeah.
Right? That would violate explicit commands in the scriptures.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Drake, you're still over there, Drake?
Yes.
Grab that microphone. How'd you make a choice to go to college? You had a variety of options to go to school, and you probably would have got a lot more had you waited to make the announcement, remove yourself from the whole recruiting pool. How'd you make a decision to go there?
So at first I messaged Coach Cox, and he replied to me. A lot of coaches hadn't, but he had replied to me, and I did some research, and I found out that he was a coach at Garden City, and he had just come from a D2 school, I think, if I remember correctly. But he's a catcher, and there's not a ton of coaches that are catchers, especially not ones that had offered me. None of them had played catcher as far as I know, except for one. And Coach Cox was a good Christian man in stature. He
From what you could see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a good system running. He's very almost like militaristic with his planning. It reminded me of you a lot. Very organized, down to almost like the minutes. He's very precise with his words. So I just trusted that, God had given me a coach in my life who reminded me, somewhat of my dad. He's a good man, good with planning things, a good role model in my life, who also coached the position that I need to get to the next level and keep playing.
Yeah.
And that would allow me to glorify God on a higher level.
Yeah. So you had another guy. You had another team though that is known for getting people to big time D1 schools. They had offered you a full scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to like kind of the things we're talking about. But at the end of the day, you pull the trigger, because some of those you probably could have glorified God at either place, right?
Yeah.
But it comes down to what in the end you liked him better, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sometimes it just comes down to that, For whatever reason, like you like this job, this choice that seems it's in front of you. And I mean, we don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He may go there to that school and who knows? But,
Yeah.
we can't play this game though. Well, man, if I'd only gone to that school, then these amazing things would have happened. If I'd have gone to that one, then, how can you live like that? You can't live like that. Do you live like that, Drake?
Nope.
No, you don't live like that. Would you just live for your next protein shake, right?
Yep.
Get me to the gym. Get me the protein. You can't, but people do. Then that's the whole point here. This point, we don't say out loud. Christians don't. I wish that I could control and knew the future.
Mm-hmm.
But when you worry about the future like that all the time, you really are.
Right.
And people do it more than they would admit.
Mm-hmm.
They worry about everything. Oh, is this person going to get sick? If they get sick, then they're going to die. Then, what will happen to their children? And will I need to take care of their children then? And what does that mean? People do that stuff.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are an hour in already, Jay.
Oh, goodness gracious. And yeah, I still have this massive headache. Is it because the satellite
Maybe
that they've got beamed down on me?
Yeah, could be.
All right. So the second one.
Yeah,
The
second one.
limitation.
A wise person accepts the limitations of power in the present. Is that how you worded it?
Yeah, limitation of the power of the present.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think he knows what is human nature. Okay, so we might say, well, I don't know the future, but one thing I do know is I can control everything right now. I have total control and power over the present moment. And if I can control everything right now, well, then in a way I can affect the future, right?
Yeah.
So he hits that off and cuts that kind of presumptive way of looking at the world out by giving 4 things that you are powerless over right now. And he does it in a way where he'll give one that's an obvious, followed by a not so obvious, one that people really fight against, right? So A, B is kind of the way that I see it unfolding in the passage.
Okay.
So the first is that you're powerless over the wind. The ESV says the Spirit. You're not able to retain the Spirit.
Right.
And the NASB puts wind, and the
Yeah.
Holman puts wind, and people might wonder, well, what is that? Well, the word,
Rua.
it's both. It
Right.
can mean both.
Mm-hmm.
The way the ESV takes it really is taking it as it's really kind of linked together. They have almost like an AA and then a AB, which doesn't make sense to me, but that's kind of how they have it here in the text. No one has the power to retain the Spirit or power of the day of death. Like it's synonymous. They're saying the same thing. NASB takes it as wind, and if you take it as wind, what you end up with is an AB and then an AB and I think that fits better.
Mm.
And he's argued like this before. He'll lay something out for you that's so obvious no one will argue with, and then he'll hit you with that which people will argue against.
Right.
He's done that already. So I chose to go with the Holman and the NASB in this interpretation, meaning that you can't control the wind. You think you're powerful and aren't limited in the present moment? Well, just observe the wind.
Mm.
Can you restrain it?
Yeah.
Can you stop it?
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't. So that's the one that I went with.
Okay.
Hopefully people kind of understood that. But if it's not, it's possible it's a double entendre. That he's meaning both.
Yeah, some wordplay.
There's some wordplay going on.
Mm-hmm. But it's true either way. I mean, we're powerless over the wind. Can't make it blow. Can't make it stop blowing.
Sometimes
can't catch it.
my bedroom is on the north wall of my house, and sometimes when we get those really, really big wintry type storms, it sounds like my house is going to follow me.
Yeah.
Or that the window is going to blow out and glass shards are going to fly through my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
You ever get that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's people that don't live here just don't understand it. They just don't get it.
Yeah. When we're talking about the wind comes sweeping down the plane. We're we're not lying.
Not a joke. Not a joke.
Yeah.
We can harness the wind. You know, we make power from it. Parker makes power from the wind.
Yeah.
You can't stop it. You can't control it.
Mm-hmm.
And that just reminds you that you're limited.
Right.
You're not God.
Mm-hmm. All right, but there's a second way in which we're powerless, and people try to fight against this one. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are no man has power to retain the wind, or power over the day of death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people will worry and work their whole life to try to extend their life by however long.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
You can't. Not even by an hour.
Right.
I reread this. You ever wonder, like, how come I don't pay that much attention to things that I read? Luke 12:25-26, when Jesus is talking about worrying, anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Which of you being anxious can add a single hour to your lifespan?
Mm-hmm.
An hour's not that long.
Right.
He said, if you're then not able to do such a small thing, why are you anxious about the rest?
Mm-hmm.
He says, that's a small thing. Extend your life by an hour.
Yeah.
But he also says, you're not able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
How could it be a small thing and something you can't do, impossible to do?
Yeah.
It's a small thing for him. He could do it.
Mm.
It's impossible for us. 1 hour. Just think about it, George.
Yeah.
You can't extend your life by an hour. It would become like the vase thing. I'm going to extend my life by an hour, so I'm running around, and that be the thing that leads to your death.
Yeah.
And it happens exactly when it was supposed to.
Yeah.
So, what are you worried about? Why are you worried about the rest? That's literally what he says. If you can't extend your life by an hour, what are you worried about all the rest of this for?
Mm-hmm.
We don't live like that.
Right.
We just worry about the day of death.
Yeah.
The older you get, anyway. Drake probably never thinks about it.
Yeah.
I never thought about it when I was his age.
Oh no. No,
Yeah.
I think about it a lot more now.
Mm-hmm. Probably the older you get, the more you will.
Which again, that doesn't mean that you just eat junk food all the time. Because I'm going to die when I'm going to die.
Yeah, then you'll become that'll become the means by which you secure
Right.
the hour of your death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The means and the ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So embrace it. You just embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
And George Whitfield, I've quoted him many a times. He said, "We're immortal.
Mm.
We don't think about ourselves that way.
Yeah.
There's a time for my death, and I'm immortal until it comes."
Right.
Now you can understand why he would want to adopt that when you realize the passage back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, that's dangerous. We just watched Master and Commander last night. Have you ever watched that?
Mm-mm.
Man, that was a different time. Men were built different back then.
Yeah.
You should watch that. It's a little slower. It's kind of an older way of making movies, but you'll see sea voyages, no joke.
Yeah.
13 times George Whitefield went back and forth across the ocean
Mhm.
preaching the gospel.
That's
You
a
m-
lot.
You might want to adopt that
Yeah.
that belief
Yeah.
that I'm immortal
Mm-hmm.
until the time of my death.
That's like George C. Payton. You know, he wanted to go to I can't remember what tribe it was. As a missionary, and the he was told you'll be eaten by cannibals,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
and he said, "Well, I may be eaten by cannibals, but you'll be eaten by worms. You know, at the end of the day, we're both going to die.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You know,
That's a good quote.
so
Yeah,
there's no sense in being anxious over it,
yeah,
right?"
it's good.
Okay, so we're powerless over the wind. We're powerless over the day of death. We are powerless over the discharge from war.
Yeah, no brainer, right? Like war starts, you're
Mm.
deployed, you're a soldier, you're not coming home.
Mm.
You go to the first sergeant, and you're like, oh, this is much more stressful occupation than I thought.
Yeah.
It's I can't get any rest at night. It's just I can't rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't rest, and they're shooting artillery at us at night, and miss my family a lot more than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm.
Think I'll go home.
Yeah.
No, you're not going home, right? This is a no-brainer, universal no-brainer across cultures. You're not getting out. Foolish. You're powerless over the discharge of war.
Mm.
And that leads into the fourth one. That's one that no one would argue with. This is the one that maybe perhaps people fight against, that the wicked, they're powerless to deliver themselves. The wicked are powerless to deliver themselves. Every person who is not a believer, though, believes that they will.
Right.
They believe that they will stand before God in their own. Well, they won't use the word wickedness. That's how the Bible would describe it. But they believe that they'll stand before God justified in their actions.
Mm.
And God will say, okay, that's fine. There's a great human illustration of this that fits in perfectly, I think, with contextually the first layer of the king's court and the realm of government. I couldn't help but think about, and that's Solomon's brother Absalom, who made a coup against David, against their father.
Mm-hmm.
Tried to overthrow his father's government with the help of, is it Ahithophel?
Ahithophel. Mm-hmm.
Ahithophel even plays into some of this too.
Yeah.
As far as being a human illustration, he first off, we should know they are living in wickedness. They're working against God. Right? God has made a promise to David, a covenant promise. Absalom and Ahithophel are working directly against God. So they have taken an evil cause. Solomon warned against that.
Mm-hmm.
They've taken up an evil cause against their king. And they're in their wickedness. It looks like they have succeeded. The coup they'll win. They'll take the kingdom from David. And David even has to leave. And God, through a series of his providential workings, who's the other wise man? It's Ahithophel's guidance versus the other wise man. God made Absalom not listen to Ahithophel, thus laying the trap to where Absalom would be defeated and die. And when Ahithophel...
Hushai.
Ahithophel realizes what's happened,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes home, and he actually kills himself.
Mm-hmm.
But Absalom goes out to war. Why would you go to war against David? Do you ever think about this? What kind of a moron do you have to be?
Yeah. He thought that he had the numbers, I guess.
Okay. I'd want about a million people or more. I mean, it's just craziness. And Absalom, of course, he dies.
Mm-hmm.
He dies in his own wickedness. So the wickedness of Absalom did not deliver him out of the hand of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the picture that you get. But the same thing that's true of him is true of every person has ever lived.
Right.
Your wickedness will not deliver you from the king, the great king.
Yeah.
No matter what you think. There's coming a day everyone will stand before God, and your wickedness won't deliver you on that day. That's the idea. So elaborated on that in the sermon.
Right.
So people can go listen if they would like to know more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Accept your limitations.
Yeah.
2 limits you have to accept. Wise person accepts the limitation. They can't know the future, and they're not actually powerful and in control over even the present. If you can relinquish that, trust God, your life will be a lot happier.
Yeah. And that's really the conclusion, is that we're limited, but God isn't.
Right. Yeah.
God is not limited by time.
Right.
The future is His. He has ordained everything that will ever happen.
Yeah.
He controls the wind. He is the one who's determined the day of our death. He's the one that has determined times of war. And he's the one that has provided a way for wicked people to be saved.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're coming into it's Christmas. It's coming up. This coming Sunday is Christmas, and that should be a big reminder to you of your limitations.
Mm-hmm.
You are limited in this capacity that you are unable to reconcile yourself with God. You are not good enough for God.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to crush a lot of people that are told they're, good enough. You're good enough, and you need to believe in yourself. Well, Christmas is a major repudiation of that.
Right.
If you were good enough, then God would not need to send Jesus Christ to be born of a virgin. The incarnation, God becoming a man, says you're limited in your sin. And God overcomes that limitation. That's the beauty. That's why we celebrate Christmas.
Right.
God does for us what we cannot do for ourselves, in sending His Son, His only Son, whom He loves, living a perfect life, being born. And just think about that, from the time of His birth all the way to adulthood, living perfectly. We've never done it for a single day. He did it every day of His life, every second of His life, loving God and His neighbor perfectly, keeping all of the law, and we haven't. And He did that for us. He lived for us, but also He dies for us, bearing our sin in Himself. He didn't die for His own sin. He had none. He died for our sins. And that's how our limitation is overcome, because He made Him who knew no sin to be sin so that we might become the righteousness of God. So in His death, burial, and resurrection, God gives to us, He overcomes that limitation, and then He gives to us something we could never get for ourselves, perfect righteousness. Righteousness that exceeds the Pharisees, which Jesus says you must have. And this is the gift. Christmas reminds us of this limitation that we have. So accept it. Accept that limitation and receive from God His gift of overcoming your limitation.
Yeah. And that's the opposite of what most people think about with Christmas, especially in America. It's, Santa Claus is coming. If you've been bad, you're going to get, coal in your stocking. If you're good, you'll get gifts.
Right.
Right. But that's the opposite of the gospel.
Right.
The gospel is not, it's not be a good person and God will give you good things.
Mm-hmm.
It's God's come to give good things for people who deserve
coal
in their stocking.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone deserved coal, and God gave us the best present freely. So it's good news. It's great news.
It is. Yeah.
The real gospel is great news for people who will understand and accept their limitations.
Right.
So.
Yep. All right. Well, this is the last podcast of the year, Jay.
Yeah.
Last one of the year. So, have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in 2023. Deo Volente, of course. Right. Well, hopefully this has been beneficial for you. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share. And as always, we hope that this helps you to become more and more conformed to Christ. So from me and Jay, we wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we will see you next time.